Marvel Rivals officially has 40 playable characters, but did you know there's 31 characters shown in game who aren't playable? From fully voiced NPCs to random nameplates, all the way to entire maps themselves. I've checked out the very first comic of every NPC in Marvel Rivals, except Krakoa, Logan the Wolf, and Orochi, as I've already covered them in the playable characters video. We kick off this journey back in the 50s for Suspense number 7. This story focuses on Sandor Xavier, who is the world's leading expert on the vampire Dracula. Suddenly a stranger shows up at his home, begging for Sandor to teach him everything. They go through the entire history of vampires, including Sandor's recent discovery that Dracula is still roaming the streets. The duo deciding to work together to finally end this vampire menace once and for all. Their hunt doesn't last long though. In fact, they find Dracula instantly, as Xandor himself was Dracula in disguise the entire time, ending the comic by attacking the stranger. We get one of Marvel's most iconic villains in Fantastic Four number 5. The group is hanging out at the Baxter building when suddenly it's covered in a giant net. Reed recognizes the voice of the person doing it though, as we get a flashback showing Victor Von Doom going to college with Reed. But he tries to perform some magical experiments, permanently scars his face, and is expelled from the school. We cut back to modern day to see Dr. Doom in his full glory. He brings him all the way to Latveria before announcing he's created the time machine, and sends the Fantastic Four to the past to steal the pirate Blackbeard's treasure. But he keeps Invisible Woman with him as a hostage. The guys spend about 5 minutes in the pirate era before immediately getting drugged and kidnapped. They wake up on a pirate ship and start a massive fight to free the rest of the prisoners. Eventually they win, and the prisoners start calling the thing Blackbeard. The rest of the group quickly realizing that Blackbeard never truly existed. He was always just the thing traveling to the past. Finally, Doom calls them back to the present and opens up the treasure they brought to reveal a bunch of worthless junk, as the thing smashes him over the head. But alas, it was just a Doombot. Glad to see Doom's been pulling that trick since his first comic. The story ends with the Fantastic Four escaping Latveria. We've got one of the newest characters in Rivals next, in Amazing Spider-Man number 25. An inventor named Spencer Smythe shows up at the Daily Bugle offering J. Jonah Jameson a new way to catch Spider-Man, his Spider Slayer, which is programmed to only hunt the most spidery thing in the area. They try to test it out on a regular spider, but it ends up capturing Peter instead, quickly realizing the robot is stronger than him. Despite the fact it clearly didn't work, Jonah still wants to rent it. So later that day, as Spider-Man is roaming New York, he encounters one of my favorite early Spider-Man villains, this goofy-ass robot that runs around with Jonah's head. They get into a big fight as we cut to Peter's home, where his 2 love interests at the time, Betty Brant and Liz Allen, have just shown up hoping to meet him. Unfortunately, he's not home, but a third woman is, Mary Jane Watson, whose face is obscured for this entire story. MJ had kind of a strange introduction. Aunt May is constantly trying to get her to date Peter, but because of his life as Spidey, he always ends up missing her. And this literally goes on for the first 3 years of Spidey comics. Anyways, the robot overpowers Peter, but Jonah has to turn it off to go pick up Spidey, so he slips out of his costume and leaves it there as a distraction, which pisses off Jonah. Unfortunately, when he gets home, not only has MJ already left, Aunt May has managed to find his spare costume. Luckily, she believes that it's just for parties, whatever parties Peter Parker is going to, but she still decides to keep the suit, so now he has no more Spidey outfits left. Making our way into the 70s, we get Captain America number 208. Steve has just escaped from a South American prison, but he's suddenly attacked by the Man-Fish. They get into a big fight, but it's interrupted by some prison guards, who scare off the creature before trying to recapture Steve. He tries to fight back, but ends up falling into a trap. One of the guards throws his own cousin in the hole too, for some reason, before attempting to incinerate the duo. But the Man-Fish comes back and kills them all. Cap is prepared to fight it again, but some music begins playing that drives it back into the water. The comic ending with its creator, Arnim Zola, appearing. Next up is Fantastic Four number 209. A cosmic being known as the Sphinx is heading towards Earth, but Reed Richards has more important things to do, like create Herbie the Robot, who, fun fact, actually appeared in a Fantastic Four cartoon first, because they didn't have the rights to the Human Torch and needed to replace him. Double fun fact, that real life lore is also canonical in the comics, as Reed mentions he got the idea from Herbie from their cartoon, and Johnny directly mentions the rights issue. Anyways, the reason he's made Herbie is to track down Galactus, as they've decided he's the only being powerful enough to stop the Sphinx. On their way to find him though, they end up in the middle of a space prison break, and have to fight off a bunch of criminal alien bugs. They eventually beat the creatures, and the comic ends with the Thing mentioning that something seems to be a little bit off about Herbie. We get my favorite Marvel character in New Mutants number 18. This comic is kind of split into 3 different stories, the first showing Sunspot, Cannonball, and Magma training in the Danger Room, while the second gives us our character, as we cut to another planet where Warlock is crawling along the ground. He's being hunted by his own father, but refuses to fight back, using the last bit of strength he has left to launch himself into space, his father vowing to track him down and finish the hunt. Finally, the third story is about Danielle Moonstar, aka Karma, going off to the woods to fight the demon bear that killed her parents. She finds it and they get into a violent battle, with her actually managing to win, but unfortunately, she was injured in the fight, and the comic ends with the rest of the team finding her bleeding out in the snow. Our next character is a little complicated, being from Moon Knight Fist of Khonshu number 1. We start off with a quick recap of Moon Knight's backstory, being left for dead in the desert by his mercenary group, so some strangers drag him into a temple where he's magically revived. He takes a cloak off a statue and officially becomes the Moon Knight, as we cut to the present where he's selling the statue of Khonshu Khonshu in an auction because he's done being the Moon Knight. However, while sleeping, he suddenly gets visions of the real Khonshu. And this is why I said it was complicated. Technically, Khonshu appears way before this, as he uses the statue to talk to Mark. But this is the first time he's actually shown and not just an object being possessed. Khonshu keeps appearing in his head until he finally listens to the voice and flies to Egypt, where he discovers 3 priests in a tomb who tell him he must become Moon Knight once again, giving him a new set of gear and setting him loose to find the guy who bought the Khonshu statue. Mark finds the guy who's dressed like Anubis, but his guards knock him out. When he wakes up, he's in the middle of some kind of ritual, but suddenly the moon appears between the clouds, and Khonshu demands his fist of vengeance to rise up. He breaks out of his chains and they get into a massive mystical fight, the comic ending with the temple beginning to collapse. Our next character was literally added the day I'm recording these lines. It's Thor number 364. We kick it off with Thor having just been transformed into a frog by Loki, so he embarks on a Pixar-style journey to find his way home. First stopping by the Avengers mansion and trying to leave a message, but Jarvis knocks him out into the street where he has to fight off some rats, before finding our character, Puddlegup. Oh, sorry. You probably know him better by his other name, Throg. But he actually doesn't get that name until like 30 years later. Puddlegup offers to bring Thor to his frog kingdom, but on the way they find the king's bodyguards dead. And after fighting off a couple more rats, they find the king himself bleeding out. Eventually, they find the rest of the frogs hiding out, and they reveal the rats are planning on dumping a bunch of rat poison in the water supply. So the comic ends with Thor heading into the sewers and running into some alligators. We finish off the 80s with Black Panther number 4. T'Challa is about to embark on some kind of spiritual test, heading off into the woods where he has to battle the panther goddess, Bast. They get into a fight that takes up the entire comic. T'Challa is actually losing the physical one-on-one, so he runs away, luring Bast into some paralytic grass that seems to knock them out. But she immediately shows back up, pissed off at T'Challa for using a cheap trick to win the fight, just like he apparently does with his kingdom's politics. Finally, he learns the lesson that the goddess was trying to teach him, which I guess was just to be more involved with his people. We get to check back in with the young X-Men in New Mutants number 98. We're in the final era of the New Mutants team, as most of them have either left or died. The only remaining members being Cannonball, Sunspot, Boom Boom, and Richter, along with their leader, Cable. Suddenly, their base is attacked by the Merc with the Mouth, Deadpool, who's been hired to kill Cable. The whole team tries to fight him off, but he's actually prepared strategies for each of them, until he falls over, having been stabbed in the back by Domino, who Cable had called for backup. They tie him up, and the comic ends with Richter abandoning the group, while Cable and Domino look through past New Mutants members, hoping to recruit a new team. Which, fun fact, that new team quickly becomes X-Force. We travel 100 years in the future for Doom 2099 number 1. Some Latvarian citizens are being harassed by guardsmen, when suddenly Dr. Doom appears, blowing up the ship before asking the people what year he's in. They tell him it's 2099 and a CEO named Tiger Wilde is running Latveria. So Doom marches into his offices, Tiger assuming it must be a Doombot, as apparently it's a common occurrence that Doombots will just randomly walk into his office trying to take back the throne. Tiger easily wins because Doom's tech is ancient by this point, and unmasks him to reveal someone who isn't Victor Von Doom. Tiger decides to make his face match the real Doom by incinerating it. Luckily, one of his employees, Fortune, is part of the Zephyro clan, which Dr. Doom is also a part of. So she saves him and brings him to her home. He decides he needs to upgrade, so he breaks into a science research base and forces them to inject him with ultra cyber quantum nanotech. The fuck am I saying? He ends the comic by declaring that Dr. Doom is dead, but also Dr. Doom lives as he dons his Doom 2099 armor. We get probably the most obscure character in Night Stalkers number 16. The Night Stalkers, a group that includes Blade, have just been attacked by a Hydra dreadnought. It lights their home on fire before stealing a powerful gun called the Exorcist and running off. We follow it to the Hydra base where Doctor Strange is floating around in his astral form, but the dreadnought manages to sense him and starts attacking, so Strange flies away to ask the Night Stalkers for help. Suddenly, out of nowhere, sensing that a large vampiric threat is about to awaken, we cut back to the Hydra base and a giant test tube is smashed open, revealing a newly created clone of Dracula, Bloodstorm 1. He kills the majority of the Hydra scientists as the comic ends with the wife of Dracula showing up, asking Blade for help. Heading into the 2000s, we've got Thor number 83. An army run by Loki has just attacked Asgard. The Asgardians managed to win the fight, but suffered a ton of casualties. So Thor vows to defeat Loki and appoints Beta Ray Bill as temporary king while he's gone. Mounting his chariot of goats, he sets off and runs into the Omni Power. Apparently Thor has been weaker than normal, as the Omni Power left him recently, and Thor just hasn't been worthy of his full power, bringing him to the World Tree, where things have gotten so bad, the messenger Ratatoskr has died. Thor reminiscing on how he used to listen to the squirrel's stories as a child. The Omni Power mentions that Odin also had to go through this once, as he brings him to a well and demands a sacrifice. Thor assuming that means he has to rip out his eye like Odin did. It doesn't work though, so he decides, what's better than one eye? Two eyes, and rips out the second one, which actually does work, and fills the well with magical water that he drinks, teaching him of the cycle of Ragnarok, how Asgard has died countless times and is always reborn. The comic ends with the Omnipower literally telling Thor to kill himself. Our next character kind of just appears out of nowhere in Black Panther #2, which starts in the past with a ceremony to choose the next Black Panther. A bunch of masked men are fighting as T'Challa's sister, Shuri, sneaks out of the castle to watch the fights. She tries to participate in the battle, but one of the fighters gets thrown out of the arena and lands on top of her, allowing someone else to take her place and win the match, removing his mask to reveal T'Challa himself, the comic being the origin of how he first became the Black Panther. Moving on to a sadder note, we've got the GLA #4. Squirrel Girl has just discovered her partner, Monkey Joe, murdered. Like, brutally. He was lit on fire while being stomped on by the GLA's villain, Leather Boy. Yes, he decided to call himself Leather Boy. Suddenly, a shadow squirrel named Death Urge shows up for Monkey Joe's soul. He decides to start screwing with her teammate, Mr. Immortal, though, taunting him about the fact he'll outlive everyone he loves. Mr. Immortal asks if there's a way he can get rid of the curse, but Death Urge reveals he's a mutant, so there's nothing he can do about his powers. Well, actually, he's a step above mutants. He's the first Homo Supreme. For some reason, Death Urge decides to tell them about some villains, so they set off to stop them. And it's truly the most fearsome foes. Some of Marvel's strongest threats, like Batroc the Leaper and Machete. Squirrel Girl easily defeats them with an army of squirrels, and they make it to the leader, Maelstrom, who, actually is a big threat, as he's about to end the entire universe. Mr. Immortal starts to talk to him, connecting that they both have powers that are so far above a regular human they feel alone, but telling him that if he ends the universe, he'll just be stuck with that feeling of loneliness for eternity. And there's a better way to solve it: killing himself. Not joking. Mr. Immortal fucking shoots himself, and the villain decides, well, if he did it, and then also shoots himself, saving the universe. Mr. Immortal, of course, survives the bullet, though he mentions that Maelstrom was actually the lucky one. In the wreckage, Squirrel Girl finds one of the surviving squirrels, deciding to name it Tippy Toe, which is the squirrel she has in Rivals. Finally, the comic ends with the entire team realizing they're all mutants, so they change their name from the Great Lakes Avengers to the Great Lakes X-Men. I might have been wrong when I said Bloodstorm was the most obscure earlier, as next up is Secret Warriors #2. The story starts with Baron von Strucker fighting a bunch of Skrulls who are trying to take over Hydra. He beats a few of them, but decides to just explode the entire base and kill off all 15,000 Hydra members inside to skip the trouble of finding more Skrulls. Later on, he gathers the heads of Hydra, one of whom being the Hive, a Hydra experiment who's a hive mind of parasites. It's pretty strongly hinted that the Hive is what Hydra is experimenting on in the Hell's Heaven map. The comic ends with them reviving an old Hydra legend, Gorgon. Next up is Marvel's assistant-sized Spectacular #2. The comic focuses on multiple different characters, but sandwiched between stories about Luke Cage and Elsa Bloodstone, we'll find our next NPC as a woman is at a restaurant, commenting about how nothing can ever satiate her hunger. Later on, she visits a hospital and goes on a monologue about how she doesn't want to be like her dad. She wants to help people, suddenly transforming into Galacta, using her abilities to eat diseases out of people's bodies and aliens who've snuck into the planet. But the story ends with her calling her dad, Galactus, begging for help, as she's found a cosmic tapeworm inside of her body that's causing her hunger to grow exponentially. We've got X-Men #1 next. We get our character right off the bat, as Jubilee has just adopted a baby named Shogo. Now, you're probably racking your brain trying to figure out where in Rivals there's a baby. Well, he's not a baby in Rivals. He's a fucking dragon. Anyways, Jubilee thinks she's being followed, so she calls the X-Men for help. Storm, Kitty Pryde, and Rogue are able to find her, but Shogo somehow sends a shock of electricity through the train, killing the drivers and forcing the X-Men to have to save everyone on board. They assume it was the guy that was following Jubilee who did it, though. But he's actually at the X-Men mansion, having surrendered to them because the baby Jubilee has is incredibly dangerous, apparently. The comic ends with the baby texting a secret lab, which awakens an Omega Sentinel. Our next comic is a little complicated. It's Superior Spider-Man #32. Not only are we dealing with the fact that Otto Octavius is currently in Peter Parker's body, we're also dealing with time travel, as Spider-Man 2099 traveled to modern day to do some hero stuff, but a machine exploded which sent Otto into the year 2099. Otto doesn't actually mind being there though, as the future tech is interesting to him, but he still wants to find his way home, robbing multiple companies, including Stark Fukizawa, to get the parts he needs and actually managing to make a working time machine. Well, it kind of works. It brings him to modern day, but in a different timeline. One where the Fantastic Four are dead, and they were actually the Fantastic Five. He starts hopping from timeline to timeline trying to find a way home, but in each one he finds a dead Spider-Man. Luckily, he manages to find one universe with a living Spider-Man, for now, as Professor Parker is being chased down by our new character, the Master Weaver. Otto pulls a Miguel O'Hara and saves him, asking him to join his crew, but it turns out he's not the first one Otto's asked. Our next story might be the most comic booky plot here, in Avengers and X-Men Axis #1. This entire issue is just one big fight, but to catch you up on how it started, Cyclops, while possessed by the Phoenix Force, killed Professor X. But Red Skull managed to obtain Professor X's brain and used it to attack the world. Magneto tried to fight him off, but his attack somehow psionically backfired, transforming the Red Skull into the Red Onslaught. The Avengers and X-Men are all desperately trying to take him down, Magneto even freeing prisoners like a young Apocalypse and Cyclops to both bolster their numbers. Though Apocalypse doesn't last long. And if it couldn't get any worse, Red Skull also has access to Tony Stark's Civil War files, which details exactly what every hero on the planet's weakness is and how to take them down. Something Tony only created for war, but Batman just casually does in his free time. The comic ends with Red Skull revealing more things he's stolen from Tony. 2 adamantium-coated Stark brand Sentinels he created just in case the mutants became evil. We've got another contender for the most obscure character in Marvel Future Fight on Eye on the Future #1. This story takes place in an alternate universe where Steve was never frozen in time, and he had a kid with Peggy. That child eventually grows up to become Sharon Rogers, aka Captain America, who, just like Luna Snow, was originally created for the game Marvel Future Fight and appears in a crossover nameplate they did. She gets a mission from Nick Fury and has to go to the moon where she investigates a temple. She ends up running into the Guardians of the Galaxy though, getting into a big fight over some crystal. Drax launches her into space, but her suit was built by Tony Stark, so she comes right back down. Peter and her dive for the crystal, but as soon as they touch it, they get a vision of 2 worlds colliding, and both decide the other one can have it, ending the comic by teaming up to save the world. And you can join the fight too in Marvel Future Fight, not sponsored, though I will take your money, Marvel. Getting back to 616, we get Doctor Strange number 381. The Sanctum's librarian, Zelma, is with a man whose eyes are haunted by 2 ghosts, so they're going to the Sorcerer Supreme for help, which isn't Stephen Strange. It's currently Loki, but he's hanging out at the bar with no doors, which is like the bar with no name, but for more magic-based characters. There's a door in the Sanctum Sanctorum he hasn't been able to get open, so he's asking the people there if they know a way to unlock it. They laugh in his face though, so he deletes the entire bar and just leaves them on the street. Thor shows up to confront him for taking Strange's place, so he goes on a whole monologue about how he surrenders and doesn't deserve the title of Sorcerer Supreme, but she sees right through his bullshit, so he decides instead to show her some frost giants planning to invade Earth, to prove that he truly wants to protect the planet. She heads off to fight them as we cut to a vet's office where Doctor Strange is currently working, but he's being yelled at by the Scarlet Witch, as she's pissed off that he's not trying to stop Loki. Eventually she leaves, calling him Dr. Dolittle, as a voice from behind him asks, "What is Dr. Dolittle?" revealing themselves to be a talking dog named Bats, who's currently alive and well, though that doesn't last long. In fact, it only lasts 1 comic. He literally dies in the next issue. Going from one of Marvel's most harmless characters to one of the strongest, it's Venom number 3. The comic immediately kicks off with Eddie having lost control of Venom, and they're attacking Miles Morales, but he just Venom blasts Venom, which snaps him out of it. They still fight though, because Miles has a bit of a bad history with the symbiotes, the Venom from his original universe having killed his mother. Eventually, Eddie talks Miles down and they head off to fight the true villain, a giant fucking symbiote dragon. Venom throws Miles straight into the dragon's mouth and he hits him with a massive Venom blast, which takes it down, but reveals the actual true villain, Knull, the god of symbiotes, who knocks out Miles before separating Eddie and Venom, ending the comic by giving Eddie a glimpse at how ancient of a threat he is. Jumping from pet to threat back to pet, we've got Winter Soldier number 1. The story starts with the Winter Soldier helping a formerly corrupt cop escape the mob and start a new life, but he has to fight off a guy with superpowers and gets his arm broken, so he goes home and calls Tony Stark to fix it. Later on, he's meditating and we get a glimpse at our character, his new pet, Alpine the Cat. The comic ends with him going to a bar when it's suddenly shot up and everyone inside is killed by a man wearing Bucky's original sidekick costume, telling him how big of a fan he is. I know I keep saying I found the most obscure character, but this truly might be it. We've got Killmonger number 4. This comic focuses on Killmonger and one of Kingpin's former mercenaries, Knight, as they meet up with another former Kingpin mercenary, King, and his wife. Killmonger is trying to help them escape to Wakanda to start a new life, but it turns out Knight had other plans, as she betrays the group and calls in a bunch of Bulgarian assassins. Killmonger starts chopping them up with an axe, but King's wife Cecilia is gunned down, so Eric dives at Knight. She beats the shit out of him though and leaves the 2 of them to bleed out in the snow. But the comic ends with a god appearing. Killmonger first assuming it's Bast, but it's quickly revealed to be Bast's sister, Killaluna. We get the largest NPC in the game by far in Powers of X number 4, which starts off with Magneto and Professor X breaking into Mr. Sinister's castle, which is filled with clones of himself. They eventually reach the one in charge. Well, they think he's the one in charge until the real leader shoots him in the head. They start to talk about forming some kind of group as we cut to the living island, Krakoa. Professor X has brought Doug Ramsey, aka Cypher, who, fun fact, is currently merged with my boy Warlock, to communicate with Krakoa, because Cypher's mutant ability is to be able to speak any language. Apparently that includes Islandese, don't say it. So Krakoa is able to explain its history, how it originally started as a bigger island named Okara, but a long time ago a demon named Amenth used his sword to rip the island in half and start terrorizing the land. Eventually though, the first mutant Apocalypse shows up to fight him off, defeating him by pushing one of the islands into the demon's dimension and closing the portal on him, leaving his horsemen to guard it. The island that stayed on Earth became Krakoa, and the island that got sealed away is Araco. The comic ends with Professor X telling Cypher to get to work on a way to translate the silent speak so everyone can understand it, because he's got big plans for the place. Finishing off the 2010s, we've got Spider-Verse #1. Miles Morales is fighting 8-Ball, who, fun fact, originated as a Sleepwalker villain. I'll take any opportunity I can get to mention Sleepwalker. Suddenly he's pulled across the multiverse, and this entire comic is just him visiting various dimensions. I'll rattle him off. He starts in a gang war between Spider People and Green Goblins, before being sent to Monster Hatton to meet Spider-Monster. Though he's quickly whipped away to a Mad Max universe where the X-Men are chasing down Lord Spider. He takes a quick pit stop in Spider-Punk's reality before finally landing in a manga-style universe to meet the person who summoned him, Spider-Zero, asking for his help to save the Web of Life. And for our final comic of this video, I actually want you to guess who the character is, because I guarantee, unless you're a big X-Men fan, or I guess a Rocket main, you're more likely to guess someone I've forgotten than the actual last character who appears in Excalibur #8. The story starts with Excalibur, a team which includes Psylocke, who, fun fact, is currently Captain Britain, fighting Cullen Bloodstone, though the fight doesn't last long as they quickly agree to talk it out over dinner. Turns out Excalibur is on his land to exterminate all the werewolves in the area, as part of some plan Apocalypse has cooked up. Cullen allows them to hunt the creatures, as long as they don't use their powers, and he's allowed to join in. The next morning, the mutants start the hunt without him, and use their powers, which pisses him off and makes him let loose the parasite within him. But the fight doesn't even last one page, as Rogue absorbs a werewolf's powers and takes him down. They collect all the werewolf skulls, but unfortunately, the final one left is a baby, which they refuse to kill, and end the comic by taking it home as a pet, naming it Amazing Baby, who's the creature on Rocket's hat and his beach skin. And that's it. Oh, they just added a new character as I was editing this? It's Alligator Loki #1, though it doesn't have any words, so I also won't speak any words.